The Dakota winter had teeth that year, sharp, hungry, biting through wool and bone, cold that turned breath to ice before it hit the ground. Nadira Stormborn didn't feel it anymore. Her feet had been numb for hours, maybe days. What mattered was the weight on her back. Running Wolf, 7 years old and burning with fever, clung to her shoulders with fingers that dug into her collarbone. His breathing came in shallow gasps, rattling like dice in a cup. White cough. Consumption. Death in 2 weeks without medicine. She'd already used 4 days. Behind her, 5 gray wind warriors tracked her through the snow-covered pines. Apache hunters who could follow a ghost across bare rock, who could smell fear in the wind. Men ordered to bring her back in chains or not at all. The forest opened onto a ravine 50 feet to frozen water below. Nadira stopped at the edge. 7 feet tall, carved from muscle and scar tissue, she looked like something from grandmother's tales. A giant to frighten children into obedience. But giants bled. An arrow hissed past her ear so close she felt the fletching brush her cheek. It buried itself in a pine trunk, vibrating like a tuning fork. Nadira turned slowly, adjusting Running Wolf's weight. The boy whimpered, but didn't cry. He'd learned not to cry. 5 warriors emerged from the trees, spread in a semicircle that cut off retreat. Young men faces painted with ash and ochre. Death masks meant to frighten. Nadira had killed men wearing those same paints. The leader's swift current notched another arrow but didn't draw, his eyes fixed on the bundle clinging to her back. "The child doesn't have to die with you, Stormborn," his voice carried across the snow. "Give him to us. He deserves better than to freeze in a murderer's arms." Nadira's hand moved to the tomahawk at her belt, fingers curling around worn hickory. "The council will hang him, just like they plan to hang me, for the crime of inconvenient truth." Swift Current's jaw tightened. He knew she was right. "You killed Black Eagle, the chieftain's son. There is no truth that excuses that." Nadira laughed, stones grinding together. "Black Eagle was a rapist who beat children for sport. I pushed him off a cliff because he was about to cave in this boy's skull with a rock. If that's murder, hang me, but don't pretend it's justice." Something flickered in Swift Current's eyes. Everyone knew what Black Eagle had been. They just didn't talk about it. The moment passed. Swift Current drew his bowstring back. "Last chance. The boy. Now." Nadira looked down at the frozen stream. 50 feet of empty air, then ice that might hold her weight or might shatter like glass. Better odds than 5 arrows at point blank. She adjusted her grip on Running Wolf, pulling him tight. "His mother asked me to protect him," with her last breath as Black Eagle strangled her for giving birth to a son too weak. "I made a promise. I don't break promises." Then she jumped. The world became white and blue and screaming wind. Running Wolf's arms choked off her air, but she didn't let go. Ice rushed up. Nadira twisted in midair, taking the impact on her wounded shoulder. Pain exploded through her body. The ice cracked beneath them, thunder rolling spider webbing in every direction. But it held. For 3 heartbeats, Nadira lay there, vision-swimming lungs fighting for air that wouldn't come. Above, warriors shouted. One started looking for a way down. Nadira forced herself to move. Every muscle screamed. She pushed up first to hands and knees, then to her feet. Running Wolf clung silent, unconscious, or too frightened to make a sound. The ice groaned. Cracks spread like veins, dark water welling through fractures. Too thin. She ran. Each step sent new fractures racing ahead like lightning. Behind her, arrows whispered through air. One caught her calf, punching through muscle-scraping bone. Another skipped off ice beside her head. Nadira didn't stop. Stopping meant dying, and she couldn't die yet. Not until Running Wolf was safe. The far bank loomed a wall of frozen earth and exposed roots. 10 feet of vertical climb with a child on her back and 2 arrows in her body. She jumped anyway. Her fingers found a root thick as her wrist, frozen solid. It held. She pulled, dragging them both up, boots scrabbling on ice-slicked earth. Behind her the stream shattered, swallowing where she'd been standing seconds before. By the time warriors found a path down, Nadira was gone. swallowed by white forest, leaving only blood drops in snow dark as garnets leading west, toward a town called Pine Creek, toward a reckoning she didn't know was coming. The sun was setting when Nadira stumbled from the trees and saw the cabin. Rough log smoke rising from a stone chimney. A single window glowed with lamplight, warm and impossibly distant. She'd been walking 6 hours since the river. The arrows were still in her shafts, snapped but heads buried in meat and muscle. Pulling them meant bleeding out before she made another mile. Running Wolf had stopped moving an hour ago. His breathing was so shallow she had to press her ear to his chest to hear it. The fever burned through him like wildfire. Another day, maybe less, before his lungs drowned him in his own fluid. Nadira's legs gave out 20 yards from the door. She went down hard, catching herself on her hands, protecting the boy even as her palms split on frozen ground. She stayed there on all fours, swaying like a tree in high wind. The cabin door opened. The man who stepped out was tall for white men, maybe 6 feet broad through the shoulders from hard work. Dark hair touched with premature gray face weathered by sun and wind and harder things. He wore a gun belt slung low holster tied down gunfighter style. Gray eyes locked on Nadira. For 3 heartbeats neither moved. Then his gaze shifted to the child on her back, to broken arrow shafts, to the blood trail across his property. He walked toward her slowly, hands visible empty. 10 feet away he stopped. "You're bleeding on my land. That tends to attract predators." Nadira tried to speak, but her throat had closed. She met his eyes, refusing to show weakness, even though weakness was all she had left. The man studied her. Then his eyes found the child again, saw shallow rise and fall of small ribs, unhealthy flush of fever on dark cheeks. Something changed in his face, something old and painful, like a wound that never healed. "How long has he been sick?" Nadira's voice came out as a rasp. 4 days. White cough. He needs medicine or he dies." The man nodded slowly, like she'd confirmed something he'd guessed. He took another step. "I'm going to help you up. Don't kill me for it." He offered his hand. Nadira stared. In 28 years she'd learned help always came with a price. Nothing was free, especially not for Apache women who stood 7 feet tall and were wanted for murder. But Running Wolf was dying, and pride was a luxury she couldn't afford. She took his hand. He pulled her to her feet with surprising strength, steadying her when her wounded leg threatened to buckle. This close she could see lines around his eyes, gray shot through dark hair. Not old, maybe 35, but carrying himself like someone who'd lived twice that long. "Can you walk?" Nadira nodded. "Then walk, before you bleed out on my porch, and I have to explain a dead giant to the sheriff." He turned toward the cabin, not checking if she followed. Nadira stood swaying, trying to decide if this was trap or miracle. Then Running Wolf coughed wet and rattling, speaking of lungs filling with fluid, and she stopped caring which. She followed him inside. The cabin was sparse. One room dominated by a stone fireplace, throwing heat and dancing shadows. A bed in one corner table and 2 chairs near the window shelves lined with canned goods and ammunition. Clean, swept pine floors, the kind that spoke of a man with too much time and too little company. "Put the boy on the bed." The man moved to a cabinet. "Gently. Don't jostle those arrow wounds." Nadira crossed to the bed, each step leaving dark footprints on clean floor. She eased Running Wolf onto blankets, hands shaking now that she'd finally stopped moving. The boy's eyes fluttered open, unfocused and glassy. "Sister," he whispered in Apache voice, barely audible. "Are we safe?" Nadira smoothed sweat-soaked hair from his forehead. "Yes, little brother. We're safe." The first lie she'd told him. The man returned with supplies. Clean cloth, whiskey, a wicked knife leather strap. He set them on the table with careful precision. "Arrows come out first, then we deal with the boy." Agreed. Nadira wanted to argue, demand he help Running Wolf first, but if she passed out from blood loss, there'd be no one to protect the child. Better to stay conscious, stay armed, stay dangerous. Agreed. He gestured to a chair. "Sit. This is going to hurt." Nadira sat. She'd been hurt before. Her husband had made sure of that, 3 years teaching her exactly how much pain the human body could endure before it broke. These arrows were nothing. The man moved behind her, examining the shoulder wound. His fingers probed swollen flesh with surprising gentleness. Went clean through. I can push it out without digging. Leg wound's worse. Barbed head. It'll tear coming out. Then make it quick. The man snorted, almost a laugh. Lady, there's no quick way, but I'll do it right. Bite down on this. He offered the leather strap. Nadira shook her head. I don't scream. His eyebrow raised. Everyone screams. I don't. Something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, maybe? Respect. Then it was gone, replaced by professional detachment. Your choice. He gripped the arrow shaft. The world became fire and iron. Nadira felt the arrowhead scrape bone as he pushed it forward, felt flesh tear as the point emerged. Blood ran hot down her back. She didn't scream. She'd promised herself the first time Black Eagle beat her unconscious that she'd never give anyone that satisfaction again. 3 years keeping that promise had turned it harder than steel. The man pulled the shaft free, immediately pressing cloth against both wounds. Still, she stayed silent, breathing through her nose, hands gripping the chair hard enough to leave dents in wood. You weren't lying. Something in his voice that hadn't been there before, almost respect. Now the leg. This one's worse. He knelt, knife in hand. Nadira watched him cut away leather wrapping, exposing the wound. Flesh around the shaft had turned purple, swollen infection setting in. I have to cut. The barbs are caught in muscle. If I just pull, I'll tear half your calf away. You understand? Nadira nodded. His jaw tightened. On 3. 1. He cut on 2. The blade opened her flesh like a mouth, exposing muscle and tendon and cruel iron buried in meat. He worked fast hands, steady, despite blood cutting away flesh, holding the barbs trapped. Then he gripped the shaft and pulled. This time Nadira made a sound. Not a scream, but a low growl from somewhere deep in her chest. The sound a wounded bear makes when it knows it's dying but refuses to go quietly. The arrow came free. Blood poured from the wound more than there should be. The man cursed, grabbing cloth, packing the wound tight enough to make Nadira's vision go white. Stay with me. Don't pass out. I need you conscious to tell me about the boy. Nadira forced her eyes to focus. What about him? He's burning up. 104 at least. What medicine has he had? Willow bark tea, sage smoke, nothing worked. The man nodded, still working on her leg, wrapping it tight. Consumption doesn't respond to herbs. He needs streptomycin, real medicine from a real doctor. Nearest one is Pine Creek, 5 miles east. But, he trailed off, hands going still. But what? He looked up, and for the first time she saw something human in those gray eyes. Regret, or guilt. But I recognize you. 7 feet tall Apache warrior traveling with a child. There's a wanted poster on you in every town between here and the Dakotas. $5,000 bounty, dead or alive. The cabin went quiet. Outside, wind howled around corners. Inside, fire crackled and popped, throwing shadows across his face. Nadira's hand moved to the knife at her belt. The man saw but didn't react, didn't reach for his gun. He just watched with those winter sky eyes, waiting. So what now? Nadira's voice was deadly calm. You going to kill me for that bounty, or turn me in and let someone else do it? The man was quiet. Then he stood, walked to the cabinet, pulled out whiskey. He took a long drink, then set the bottle down with more force than necessary. I should. God knows I need that money. Got debts that'll bury me if I don't pay them soon. $5,000 would solve every problem I've got. Then do it. Nadira was tired, so tired. If this was where it ended, at least Running Wolf might have a chance. But help the boy first, please. Whatever I did, whatever they say I did, he's innocent. The man turned to look at her again, really look. Not at the wounds or weapons or terrifying height, at her eyes dark and desperate and completely empty of hope. What did you do, Truth? Not what the posters say. Nadira met his gaze. I killed my husband because he was beating a child to death. Then I ran because the tribal council would rather execute me than admit the chieftain's son was a monster." Silence. Running Wolf coughed wet and horrible rattling in his small chest. The man looked at the boy, then back at Nadira. Something shifted in his expression. "I had a sister, 16 years old, died 2 years ago because I couldn't afford medicine that would have saved her. Spent every day since wishing I could go back, wishing I'd chosen different." He paused. "Made myself a promise I'd never let money be the reason someone died again." He walked to the bed, looked down at Running Wolf's fever-flushed face. "I'll take you to the doctor in Pine Creek tomorrow morning. We'll get the boy his medicine. After that, we'll figure out what comes next." Nadira stared. "Why would you help me?" His laugh was bitter. "Lady, I've got no idea. Maybe because I'm tired of being the kind of man who'd let a kid die for money. Maybe because you remind me of my sister, stubborn and fierce and too brave for your own good. Or maybe I'm just stupid." He grabbed a heavy coat from a peg. "What's your name? Your real name?" "Nadira Stormborn." "Jonas Coulter. Try not to bleed on my floor more than you already have." Then he was gone, leaving Nadira alone with the dying boy and 100 questions she didn't have strength to ask. She dragged herself to the bed, sitting beside Running Wolf, taking his small hot hand in hers. Outside she could hear Jonas moving around, checking weapons, preparing for trouble. For the first time in 4 days, Nadira allowed herself to close her eyes. Not to sleep, never to sleep, but to rest for just a moment. Tomorrow they would go to Pine Creek. Tomorrow she would get Running Wolf his medicine. Tomorrow the warriors would likely find them. But tonight, for a few stolen hours, they were safe. The second lie. This one she almost believed. Jonas came back inside an hour later, stamping snow from his boots. Nadira hadn't moved from the bed, one hand still holding Running Wolf's, the other resting on her knife. "No tracks near the cabin. Whoever's following you, they're still a ways back." Jonas moved to the fire, added more wood. "But they'll come. Men don't give up on a $5,000 bounty easy." "It's not about the money." Nadira's voice was rough. "It's about silence." Jonas turned to look at her. "What do you mean?" Nadira was quiet for a long moment. Then slowly, like pulling arrows from flesh, she told him. About the night 13 years ago when she was 15. About 30 Apache women gathered in secret, whispering about the weapons they'd seen. Rifles with U.S. Army stamps hidden in the chieftain's lodge. About how Gray Wind, her adopted father, had discovered them. About the massacre that followed. How warriors swept through the camp, killing every woman who'd been at that gathering. How they blamed it on white outlaws, on bandits. How no one questioned it because questioning meant death. "I was there," Nadira said, her voice flat. "Hidden in brush, too frightened to move, watching my mother die. Watching Gray Wind give the orders. He saw me afterward, knew I'd witnessed it. So he adopted me. Raised me as his daughter. Married me to his son. All to keep me quiet." Jonas sat down heavily in a chair. "And when you killed Black Eagle, I became a threat again. A witness who'd broken free." Nadira looked down at Running Wolf. "They'll never stop hunting me. Not until I'm dead. Or until the truth comes out. Who'd believe an Apache woman over a tribal chieftain? I'm already branded a murderer." Jonas was quiet, thinking. Then he stood, walked to a trunk near the bed and pulled out a folded piece of paper. A wanted poster, edges worn from handling. He spread it on the table. Nadira's face stared back, rendered in crude ink drawings that somehow captured her height, her presence. The text was standard. Wanted for murder. $5,000 reward. But at the bottom, in different ink, someone had written in small letters, "Knows the secret of the Gray Wind massacre." "I found this 2 weeks ago," Jonas said. "Didn't know what it meant until now. Someone out there knows you're telling the truth. Someone wants that information found." Nadira stared at the poster, at those small, damning words. "Who wrote that? Don't know. But it means you're not alone in this. Someone else is looking for justice." Before Nadira could respond, Running Wolf convulsed his small body, arching off the bed. Foam flecked his lips. His eyes rolled back, showing only whites. Nadira was on her feet, instantly, wounded leg forgotten. "What's happening?" Jonas pushed past her, grabbed the boy's shoulders, turning him on his side. "Seizure. The fever's too high. His brain's cooking." He ran to the cabinet, came back with a bottle and cloth. He soaked the cloth in cold water, pressed it to Running Wolf's forehead, his neck, anywhere skin showed. "We need to bring the fever down. Now, help me strip off his shirt." Together they worked, peeling away sweat-soaked clothes, bathing the boy's burning skin with cold water. Running Wolf thrashed weakly, making sounds that weren't quite words in any language. 5 minutes passed. 10. Finally the seizure broke. Running Wolf went limp, breathing shallow but steady. Jonas checked his pulse. Weaker, but he's stable, for now. Nadira sank back onto the bed, her hands shaking. Not from pain or exhaustion, but from fear. Pure, undiluted fear that she was going to watch this child die, that all her running and fighting meant nothing in the end. Jonas saw it. He moved to sit beside her, careful to keep distance, to not crowd. "We'll get him the medicine," he said quietly. "I promise you that." "Why?" Nadira's voice broke. "Why do you care? You don't know us. You could collect that bounty, pay your debts, live your life." Jonas was silent for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was distant, remembering. "Her name was Sarah, my little sister. She was 16 when her heart started failing. Doctors said she needed surgery, new medicine from back east. Cost $600, might as well have been $6 million. I was working bounties then, making good money, but I'd just spent everything I had buying this land, building this cabin. Thought I had time to earn it back." He paused, jaw working. "I didn't. She died 3 months later, drowning in her own blood because her heart couldn't pump anymore. I held her hand while she suffocated. She looked at me with these eyes, you know, not angry, not blaming, just sad. Like she was sorry for being such an inconvenience." Nadira saw moisture in his eyes, quickly blinked away. "I swore that day I'd never let money be the reason someone died again. Never let another kid look at me with those eyes." He turned to face her. "So yeah, I need that $5,000. My debts are real, my problems are real. But that boy's life is more real, and I'm done being the kind of man who'd trade a child's life for gold." Nadira didn't know what to say. She'd never met anyone who chose hardship over profit, who valued a stranger's life over their own survival. In her world, such men didn't exist. "Thank you," she finally whispered. Jonas stood embarrassed by his own emotion. "Get some rest. We leave at first light. It's a 2-hour ride to Pine Creek and you'll need your strength." He moved to a bedroll near the fire, settling in with his back against the wall, gun within easy reach. Nadira lay down beside Running Wolf, one arm around the boy, ready to spring up at any threat. Neither of them slept. They just lay there in the firelight, two broken people bound together by desperation and the fragile hope that tomorrow might be different from yesterday. That maybe, just maybe, doing the right thing would be enough. Dawn came pale and cold. Jonas woke before sun-up, a habit from years of being hunted. He checked the boy first, still alive, still fevered, but breathing steady. Then he checked Nadira, found her already awake, eyes tracking his movement. "We need to leave now," Jonas said. "You'll ride with me. Can you mount?" Nadira pushed herself up, testing her wounded leg. It held, barely. "I can ride." 20 minutes later they were mounted on Jonas's bay gelding, Nadira behind him with Running Wolf cradled in her arms, her leg hooked around the cantle for balance, her body warm against Jonas's back. They rode east through pine forest, following trails only locals knew. The sun climbed higher, turning snow to blinding white. "Tell me about Pine Creek," Nadira said after an hour of silence, her voice strained with pain she refused to show. "What kind of town?" "Small. 200 people, ranchers mostly. One doctor, Amos Pritchard, good man who knows his business." "Will he help us?" "He'll help the boy." Jonas paused. You're 7 feet tall and Apache. People will notice. And if they act on it," Jonas's hand moved to his revolver, "then I'll handle it." "Why risk yourself?" Jonas thought of Sarah, of her last breath rattling in her chest. Had a sister. Died because I chose money over medicine. Won't make that mistake twice. Behind him, Nadira's forehead rested briefly against his back. Understanding. Shared grief. My mother died when I was 15, she said quietly. 30 women slaughtered in one night. The tribe said outlaws, but I was there hidden. I saw who gave the order. Jonas went still. Who? The man who adopted me afterward. The chieftain. My father. The words hung heavy in cold air. Jonas fit pieces together. The wanted poster's hidden message. That's why they want you dead. Not because of your husband. Because you witnessed mass murder. I tried to talk. For 13 years. But who believes an orphan over a respected chieftain? Nadira's voice went flat. So I stayed silent. Let him adopt me, train me, marry me to his monster son. Stayed quiet while Black Eagle beat me, raped me, told me I was lucky anyone would want a freak. Until you weren't quiet anymore. Until he tried to kill this boy for being weak, for being his mother's son, after Black Eagle strangled her for giving birth to a disappointment. Her arms tightened around Running Wolf. I pushed him off a cliff, felt nothing but relief when he hit the rocks. Jonas nodded. Can't say I blame you. They rode on in silence, trail descending toward the valley where Pine Creek sat nestled against the river. Smoke rose from chimneys gray against blue sky. They were half a mile from town when Jonas spotted the rider. He came from the south, moving fast, pushing his mount harder than wise on icy ground. Something about how he sat his saddle set off alarms in Jonas's head. We've got company. Nadira tensed. How many? One, for now. The rider closed distance quickly. Apache, maybe 35, dressed in mixture of buckskin and white man's clothes, rifle in scabbard at his knee. His face was scarred 3 parallel lines from temple to jaw. Jonas's hand moved to his gun. Behind him, Nadira went very still. The rider pulled up 20 feet away, horse dancing nervously. Nobody moved. Then the man raised his hand, palm out. Peace. Sister, he said in Apache eyes on Nadira. I've been looking for you. Kael. Nadira breathed and Jonas heard something new in her voice. Hope. What are you doing here? Kael glanced at Jonas, then back to Nadira. I came to warn you, and to help if you'll let me. Warn me about what? Kael's scarred face went grim. The warriors tracking you aren't trying to capture you. Father sent them to kill you. All of you. No witnesses, no trial. Just bodies buried where no one will find them. Jonas felt Nadira's sharp intake of breath. Why tell me this? Because I'm done being silent. Done protecting a man who murdered his way to power. Done pretending my brother was anything but the monster we all knew. Steel in his voice now. I want the same thing you do. Truth, justice, revenge. He urged his horse closer, stopping when Jonas's hand tightened on his revolver. Easy, white man. I'm not your enemy. Kael pointed at Nadira. Or I was until Black Eagle took something from me I can never get back. What did he take? Jonas asked. Kael's jaw tightened. My wife. Said she was too pretty for a scarred warrior. Took her to his bed whether she wanted to go or not. When she fought, he beat her until she stopped moving. Then told father it was an accident. Heavy silence, thick with old pain and fresh rage. Jonas looked at Nadira, saw his own thoughts reflected. This man was either their best ally or most dangerous trap. How do I know you're telling the truth? Nadira asked. Kael reached into his shirt, pulled out folded paper. He urged his horse closer, ignoring Jonas's warning look, handed the paper to Nadira. Jonas watched her unfold it with one hand, the other cradling Running Wolf. Her eyes moved across the page. He saw the moment she understood. Her face went pale, then flushed with something that might be rage or vindication. What is it? Jonas asked. Nadira's voice shook. A confession. Written by the tribal healer who treated my mother and the other women the night they died. He documented every wound, every injury. He wrote that the weapons used were all tribal make belonging to the chieftain's personal guard. There's more, Cale said quietly. I have the ledger. Documenting father's weapons deals with the U.S. Army. Every transaction, every betrayal written in his own hand. Proof he sold rifles to the men killing Apache families on the frontier. Jonas whistled low. That's enough to hang him. Maybe not in tribal court, but federal court they'd bury him. If we can get it to them, Cale said. But first survive. The warriors tracking you are good sister, the best. Led by Swift Current father's most loyal dog. They'll catch up within hours. Jonas looked at Running Wolf, at the child's labored breathing chest, struggling for each breath. Hours. They had hours before the boy's lungs gave out. We're going to Pine Creek. The boy needs a doctor now. If these warriors want to come after us, they can try. But they'll go through me first. Cale studied Jonas' scarred face, unreadable. Then nodded. You're either very brave or very stupid white man. Probably both. You coming or staying? Cale glanced back the way he'd come, weighing options one final time. Then turned his horse east. I'm coming. Someone needs to keep you alive long enough to regret this. They rode into Pine Creek as sun reached its zenith. 3 riders and a dying child, leaving a blood trail in snow like breadcrumbs for wolves that would surely follow. Pine Creek didn't look like much. One main street, maybe 30 buildings arranged in haphazard settlement growth. General store at one end, saloon at the other. Between them clustered blacksmith livery boarding house and establishments serving the ranching community. Dr. Amos Pritchard's office sat near center, identifiable by wooden sign with painted red cross. Jonas guided his horse to the hitching post, acutely aware of stares they drew. A 7-foot Apache woman tended to attract attention. Stay here, Jonas said, dismounting carefully. Keep your head down. Cale watched the street. Cale had already positioned his horse for clear view in both directions, hand resting on rifle. Go. We'll be fine. Jonas lifted Running Wolf from Nadira's arms, struck by how light the boy was, how fragile. The child's eyes opened briefly, unfocused. Ghost man, Running Wolf whispered in Apache. Are we there? Yeah, kid. We're there. He pushed through the doorbell, jingling. The office smelled of carbolic acid and dried herbs. A middle-aged woman at a desk looked up, took in blood on his coat, and child in his arms immediately stood. Is the doctor in the back? I'll get him. She disappeared. Jonas heard low voices. Then doctor. Amos Pritchard emerged, white-haired and kind-eyed, wiping his hands on a towel. Those eyes went straight to Running Wolf expression, shifting to professional concern. Bring him here. Pritchard gestured to an examination table. How long has he been like this? 4 days with fever. Maybe longer before that. Woman caring for him says consumption. Pritchard pulled out his stethoscope, pressed it to Running Wolf's chest, listened. His face grew grimmer. She's right. Advanced stage. I can hear fluid in his lungs, probably blood too. He needs streptomycin. Now. Do you have it? Pritchard shook his head. Used my last dose 2 weeks ago. I've sent for more from Fort Laramie. Won't be here for another week, maybe more if weather turns. Jonas felt something cold settle in his gut. He doesn't have a week. No. He has maybe 2 days. 3 if we're lucky. The door jingled. Jonas turned to find Nadira standing in the doorway, blood seeping through bandages, face set in determined lines. I'm going to Fort Laramie. Not a question. You can barely stand, Jonas pointed out. Then I'll crawl if I have to. Nadira moved to the table, looked down at Running Wolf's fevered face. He's all I have left. Everyone else I've loved is dead. I won't let him join them. Pritchard looked between them. Fort Laramie is 3 days' ride. 3 days back. 6 total. Which means he'll be dead before we return, Jonas said flatly. Unless you convince the fort surgeon to give you enough streptomycin today, and you ride like hell getting back. Could do it in 2.5 days if you don't stop to sleep. Nadira's hand went to Running Wolf's forehead, smoothing back his hair with infinite gentleness. Then that's what we'll do. Jonas wanted to argue, But he looked at the boy's gray face, heard the wet rattle of breathing, and knew there wasn't another choice. "I'll need supplies, food, extra ammunition, fresh horse." "You'll need money," Pritchard said. "Army surgeons don't hand out medicine for free. Streptomycin runs about $300 for a full course." $300. Jonas had maybe 80 in his saddlebags. The rest was tied up in debts to Silas Crow debts, coming due in less than a month. "I'll figure it out." Pritchard studied him, then nodded. "I can keep the boy here, keep him comfortable. Give him willow bark for fever steam treatments. Buy you a little time." "Thank you," Nadira said, naked gratitude in her voice that made Jonas look away. The door opened, admitting Kyle. His expression was tight, urgent. "We need to leave. Now." "What's wrong?" "Riders coming from the north, 5 of them, Swift Current and his warriors. They'll be here in 10 minutes. Jonas cursed. "Can we make it out before they arrive?" "Not with her wounded and the boy dying. They'd run us down in minutes." Nadira's straightened hand moving to her tomahawk. "Then we fight." 5 against 3, bad odds. People would get caught in crossfire. Jonas shook his head, thinking fast. Then his eyes fell on the doctor's bag, the examination table, Running Wolf's still form. An idea formed, reckless and probably stupid. "Dr. Pritchard, how do you feel about lying to Apache warriors?" The old doctor's eyebrows rose. "Depends on the lie." "Tell them the boy died. Tell them we brought him here too late, that he succumbed to fever an hour ago." Understanding dawned on Pritchard's face. "And the woman?" "Already left. Grief-stricken, riding for the border. You don't know which direction." Nadira stepped forward. "They won't believe you. Swift Current isn't stupid." "No, but he's dutiful. If he thinks the boy is dead and you're gone, he might decide tracking you across open country in winter isn't worth it." "And if he doesn't buy it?" Cale asked. Jonas's hand moved to his revolver. "Then we do this the hard way." Pritchard looked at all of them, at blood and desperation and grim determination, and sighed. "I became a doctor to save lives, but letting those men kill a sick child would be harm." He moved to a cabinet, pulled out a dark glass bottle. "Laudanum. Enough to make the boy look dead if they check for breathing. Slows the heart, makes the skin cold. Wears off in a few hours." "Do it," Nadira said. Pritchard measured a careful dose, tilted, Running Wolf's head back, poured the medicine down the boy's throat. Within minutes, the child's already shallow breathing became almost imperceptible. His lips took on a bluish tinge. "Now hide," Pritchard said, gesturing to a back room, "and stay quiet." Jonas, Nadira, and Kyle moved quickly into storage, a small area filled with medical supplies and camphor smell. Through the door crack, they had a view of the examination table and front entrance. They didn't wait long. The door burst open hard enough to make the bell clatter. Swift Current strode in 4 warriors at his back, all armed, all looking like they'd ridden hard. The lead warrior's eyes swept the room with trained hunter's gaze. "Where is she?" Swift Current demanded in English. Pritchard looked up from where he sat beside Running Wolf's still form, expression grave. "If you mean the Apache woman, she left an hour ago. Didn't say where." Swift Current moved to the table, looked down at Running Wolf. For a terrible moment, Jonas thought the warrior would check for a pulse, discover the deception. But Swift Current just stared at the boy's blue-tinged face, at the unnatural stillness, and something flickered in his expression. Not satisfaction. Regret. "The child is dead," he said. Not a question. "Consumption. His lungs were too far gone. I'm sorry." Swift Current was quiet. Then he turned to his warriors, spoke in rapid Apache. Jonas couldn't understand the words, but understood the tone. "Stand down. Mission accomplished." "The woman," Swift Current said, turning back. "Which way did she go?" "North. Riding like demons were chasing her." "Which I suppose you were." Swift Current nodded slowly, gestured to his men. They filed out, mounted up, and within minutes, hoofbeats faded into distance. Jonas let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Beside him, Nadira sagged against the wall, wounded leg finally giving out. Kyle caught her before she hit the floor. Pritchard appeared in the doorway. "They're gone. For now." "How long until the laudanum wears off?" Nadira asked, voice tight with pain and exhaustion. 3 hours, maybe 4. Then the boy will wake up just as sick as before. Pritchard looked at Jonas. "Which means you need to be on your way to Fort Laramie. Now. Before Swift Current gets suspicious and comes back." Jonas helped Nadira to her feet. "Can you ride?" "I'll ride or die trying." "That's what I'm afraid of," Jonas muttered. 20 minutes later they were mounted and ready. Jonas had traded his exhausted gelding for a fresh horse from the livery, along with a second mount for Nadira. The horses cost him $40, leaving him with even less for medicine. One problem at a time. K.L. pulled his horse alongside Jonas's. "I'm coming with you." Jonas shook his head. "Someone needs to stay with the boy. Dr. Pritchard can protect one sick child. But you two riding alone into Apache territory, you'll need help." "He's right," Nadira said quietly. "The route to Fort Laramie crosses Gray Wind Land. We'll never make it without someone who knows the safe paths." Jonas looked at Kyle at determination in the man's scarred face, recognized a kindred spirit. Someone else carrying ghosts, looking for redemption. "All right, but if this goes wrong—" "We'll make it back," Kyle said with absolute certainty, "because the alternative is unacceptable." They rode out of Pine Creek as sun began its descent toward western horizon. 3 unlikely allies bound together by desperation and hope and the fragile life of a dying child. Behind them in Dr. Pritchard's office, Running Wolf lay still as death heart beating so slowly it could barely be counted. Ahead, 3 days of hard riding through winter and enemy territory with no guarantee of success and every likelihood of failure. But they rode anyway, because sometimes the only choice is to keep moving forward even when the path ahead is darkness and the odds are impossible, and the only thing pushing you onward is stubborn refusal to surrender to despair. Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes it has to be. The first day of riding was deceptively quiet. They left Pine Creek behind 3 riders pushing east into territory that belonged to neither white settlers nor the Gray Wind tribe. Disputed land, the kind that changed hands with the seasons and the fortunes of war. Snow covered everything, turning the world into endless white, punctuated by dark stands of pine and the occasional frozen creek. Jonas led following trails that existed more in memory than reality. Behind him rode Nadira, her wounded leg wrapped tight, her face a mask of concentration as she fought to stay conscious. Kyle brought up the rear rifle across his saddle, eyes constantly scanning their back trail. They didn't speak. Speech took energy, and energy was a resource they couldn't spare. By noon they'd covered 15 miles. Jonas called a halt near a frozen stream, more to check on Nadira than because the horses needed rest. She dismounted stiffly, her leg nearly giving out. Jonas caught her elbow. "You're bleeding through the bandage." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're going to pass out from blood loss before we make it halfway." Nadira pulled her arm free. "Then I'll pass out, but I won't stop." Jonas recognized that tone. It was the same one Sarah had used near the end when every breath was agony, but she refused to show weakness. The tone of someone who'd already decided they'd rather die than quit. "At least let me change the dressing," Jonas said. Nadira hesitated, then nodded. She sat on a fallen log while Jonas unwrapped the blood-soaked cloth around her calf. The wound looked angry red and swollen, the edges showing early signs of infection. He cleaned it as best he could with snow, and Whiskey re-wrapped it with clean bandages from his saddlebag. "You should have stayed with the doctor," Jonas said quietly. "Let me and Cale make this ride." "And if you don't come back? What then? Running Wolf wakes up alone, frightened, wondering where I am." Nadira shook her head. "No. I made him a promise. I'll keep it or die trying." Cale appeared beside them, holding 3 strips of dried venison. "Eat. We won't stop again until dark." They ate in silence, chewing the tough meat, washing it down with snow melted in their mouths. Jonas studied the land ahead, calculating distances and dangers. Fort Laramie was 70 miles east. At the pace they were riding, pushing the horses hard, but not to breaking, they might make it in 2 days if nothing went wrong. But something always went wrong. "Cale," Jonas said, "you said Swift Current and his warriors were tracking Nadira. Where would they be now?" Cale considered. "If they believe the doctor's lie, riding north thinking they're chasing her. But Swift Current is not a fool. By nightfall he'll realize the trail goes cold. By tomorrow morning he'll start asking questions." "How long before he comes back to Pine Creek?" "Day and a half. Maybe 2. Cale's scarred face was grim. "And when he discovers the deception, he'll be angry. Angry men make mistakes, but they also move fast." Jonas did the math. They had maybe 36 hours before Swift Current was back on their trail, and once he was, the warrior would track them relentlessly. 5 Apache hunters against 3 exhausted riders, one of whom was wounded and barely staying in the saddle. Bad odds. Again. "Then we ride faster," Nadira said, pulling herself to her feet. "We ride until the horses drop or we do." They mounted up and pushed on the afternoon sun, weak and pale above them. The landscape grew more rugged hills, rising into small mountains, valleys, cutting deep between them. This was the edge of gray wind territory, the boundary marked not by signs but by ancient understanding. Past this point they were truly in enemy country. As the sun touched the horizon, painting the snow in shades of orange and red, Cale raised his hand. They stopped. "What is it?" Jonas asked. Cale pointed to a stand of trees 300 yards ahead. "Smoke, very faint. Someone has a fire." Jonas strained his eyes but saw nothing. "You sure?" "I'm sure. Could be trappers. Could be hunters from the tribe. Could be nothing." Kyle's hand moved to his rifle. "But we should know which before we ride into whatever it is." Jonas nodded. "Wait here. I'll scout ahead." "No." Nadira's voice was firm. "We stay together. If it's a trap, better to face it as 3 than have them pick us off one by one." She had a point. Jonas checked his revolver, made sure it moved smooth in the holster. "All right. Slow and quiet. At the first sign of trouble we scatter. Meet up at the creek we passed 2 miles back." They approached the trees at a walk, horses' hooves crunching in snow loud enough to wake the dead. As they drew closer, Jonas could smell it. Wood smoke, yes, but also something else. Cooking meat. His stomach growled despite the tension. The trees opened onto a small clearing. In the center, a fire burned low. Beside it sat a man, old and weathered, wrapped in furs that made him look like a bear. He didn't look up as they entered, just kept turning the rabbit on a spit over the flames. "Took you long enough," the old man said in English, his voice like gravel in a tin cup. "Been expecting you for the last hour." Jonas's hand stayed on his gun. "You know us. Know of you. Word travels fast in these mountains." The old man finally looked up, and Jonas saw he had only one eye, the other covered with a leather patch. Apache woman, tall as a pine tree, white bounty hunter with a conscience, and Cale Wind Rider, the scarred warrior. "You're either the bravest fools in Dakota or the stupidest." "Who are you?" Nadira demanded. "Name's Ezra Cobb. Trapper mostly. Sometimes scout for the army, sometimes guide for wagon trains, sometimes just a lonely old man who likes his solitude." He gestured to the rabbit. "Hungry, got more than I can eat." Jonas exchanged glances with Cale and Nadira. Every instinct screamed trap, but the old man seemed genuine, and they needed information. "Why were you expecting us?" Jonas asked, dismounting slowly. "Because Swift Current and his warriors came through here 6 hours ago, riding north like demons were chasing them. Then they stopped, talked among themselves, and turned around. Figured they'd been played. Figured whoever played them would be coming this way soon." Ezra pulled the rabbit off the fire, tore off a leg, offered it to Nadira. "Also figured anyone who could fool Swift Current was worth meeting." Nadira took the offered meat warily. "You know Swift Current?" "Know of him. Good tracker, loyal to a fault, mean as a rattlesnake when he's crossed." Ezra bit into his portion of rabbit. "He'll catch up to you tomorrow, maybe the day after. Depends how much he sleeps." "Let him come," Nadira said, though Jonas heard the exhaustion in her voice. Ezra laughed, a sound like rocks tumbling. "You're wounded, girl, bleeding through your bandages. Your horse is about done, and you're riding straight into Grey Wind territory with 5 trained warriors on your tail." He shook his head. "Bravery's admirable, but bravery without brains just gets you killed." "You have a better suggestion?" Jonas asked. Ezra pulled out a piece of charcoal and a scrap of leather. He sketched quickly, marking trails and landmarks. "You're taking the main pass through the mountains, yes? The one everyone uses?" Jonas nodded. "That's where Swift Current will expect you to go. And that's where he'll set his ambush." Ezra marked an X on the leather. "But there's another way. Longer by 10 miles, twice as dangerous, but it comes out behind Fort Laramie. Swift Current won't think to watch it because only a fool would try it in winter." "What makes it dangerous?" Cale asked. "Narrow canyon walls close enough to touch on both sides in places. One rock slide and you're buried. Creek runs through it frozen this time of year, but the ice is thin in spots. Fall through and you won't climb out." Ezra looked at each of them in turn. "But if you make it through, you'll gain half a day. Maybe more." Jonas studied the crude map. It was a gamble. The safe route might get them ambushed. The dangerous route might kill them outright. But at least on the dangerous route their fate would be in their own hands. "We'll take the canyon," Jonas said. Ezra nodded, unsurprised. "Figured you might. Head east from here for 3 miles, you'll see a rock formation that looks like a broken tooth. Canyon entrance is just past it. And—" he reached into his pack, pulled out a bundle wrapped in oilcloth. "Take this. Army medicine kit. Got some bandages, laudanum, and something called sulfa powder. Supposed to fight infection. Might help the girl's leg." Nadira accepted the bundle, surprise clear on her face. "Why help us?" Ezra's one eye fixed on her. "Because 30 years ago I watched the Army massacre a village of peaceful Cheyenne. Men, women, children. Slaughtered them all, then lied about it, said they were hostiles. I helped bury the bodies. Been carrying that weight ever since." He looked away. "Maybe helping you carry yours will lighten mine some." They stayed with Ezra for an hour, resting the horses, eating hot food, warming themselves by the fire. The old trapper told them about the canyon, about the landmarks to watch for, about which sections of ice were safe and which would crack under a horse's weight. As they prepared to leave, Ezra caught Jonas's arm. "That boy you're trying to save, the sick one, he worth all this?" Jonas thought of Running Wolf's small hand in Nadira's, large one of the way the child called her sister even though they shared no blood. Thought of Sarah, of all the children who died because adults made the wrong choices. "Yeah," Jonas said quietly. "He's worth it." Ezra nodded. "Then ride hard and don't look back. And if you make it through, tell that Army doctor at Fort Laramie that Ezra Cobb says he owes me a favor. Might help convince him to part with that medicine." They rode out into the gathering darkness, following Ezra's directions. Behind them, the old trapper's fire dwindled to embers. Ahead, the broken tooth rock formation loomed against the stars. The canyon waited. They reached the canyon entrance just after midnight. The broken tooth rock towered 50 feet high, fractured and jagged, looking exactly like its name in the moonlight. Beyond it, the canyon mouth yawned black and uninviting. "We should wait for daylight," Kyle said. "Riding through there in darkness is suicide." "We can't wait," Nadira said. "Every hour we lose is an hour Running Wolf doesn't have." Jonas dismounted, walked to the canyon entrance, peered into the darkness. He could hear water, the sound of the creek flowing somewhere beneath ice. The canyon walls rose on either side, maybe 20 feet apart at the entrance, narrowing as they went deeper. "We'll walk the horses," Jonas decided. "Lead them by the reins. Feel our way forward. Slow but safer than riding blind." They lit torches from Jonas's saddlebags, crude things made of pine pitch and cloth, but they pushed back the darkness enough to see a few feet ahead. Single file they entered the canyon. Jonas went first, testing each step before putting his weight down. Nadira followed, her wounded leg dragging. Cale brought up the rear torch held high, watching for falling rocks. The canyon narrowed quickly. Within 100 yards, the walls were close enough that Jonas could touch both sides with outstretched arms. The ceiling closed in overhead, turning the passage into a tunnel. Their breathing echoed strangely distorted by stone. An hour passed, then two. They'd covered maybe a mile, progress agonizingly slow. The ice beneath their feet groaned and cracked, but held. Once Jonas's foot broke through, plunging into freezing water up to his ankle. He pulled it out quickly, kept moving before frostbite could set in. Nadira stumbled, caught herself against the canyon wall. Jonas turned back to help her, saw her face was gray, her lips nearly blue. "I'm fine," she said before he could ask. "You're not fine. You need to rest." "Can't rest. Have to keep moving. Have to get to Running Wolf." Her words were starting to slur. Hypothermia, blood loss infection. Take your pick. She was shutting down her body, finally giving up after days of abuse. Jonas made a decision. He handed his reins to Kyle, then moved to Nadira's side. Before she could protest, he put his arm around her waist, taking most of her weight. "Lean on me, just until we get through this canyon." For a moment he thought she'd refuse. Pride was a powerful thing, especially for someone who'd spent years being told she was too big, too strong, too much. But then she sagged against him, and Jonas realized just how close to collapse she really was. They continued like that, Jonas half carrying Nadira, Kyle leading both horses. Progress slowed even more, but at least they were moving. 3 hours into the canyon they heard it. A sound like distant thunder growing louder. The walls began to shake. "Rock slide," Kyle shouted. "Run!" But there was nowhere to run. The canyon was too narrow to turn the horses. Jonas looked ahead, saw a slight widening, maybe 50 feet forward. He grabbed Nadira, practically dragging her, Kyle and the horses right behind them. The sound grew deafening. Rocks began falling from above, small ones at first, then larger. One struck Jonas's shoulder, sending pain shooting down his arm. Another hit his horse, making the animal scream and rear. They reached the widening just as the main slide hit. Tons of rock cascaded down where they'd been standing seconds before, filling the passage, blocking the way back. Dust and debris filled the air, choking them, turning the world into gray chaos. Jonas pulled Nadira against the wall, covering her body with his as rocks continued to fall. He felt impacts against his back, his legs, but nothing big enough to crush, just enough to hurt. Finally, it stopped. Silence descended, broken only by the sound of their harsh breathing and the occasional trickle of small stones. Jonas checked himself. Bruised, battered, but nothing broken. He checked Nadira. She was conscious, eyes wide but unharmed. Kyle had a cut above his eye, blood running down his face, but he was on his feet. The horses had survived, though Jonas's gelding had a nasty gash on its flank. Jonas turned to look at the rock slide. The passage behind them was completely blocked, tons of stones sealing the way they'd come. "We can't go back," Kyle said unnecessarily. "Then we go forward," Jonas replied. "How much farther to the other end?" Kyle consulted the mental map Ezra had given them. "Maybe 2 miles, maybe more. Hard to say in the dark." Nadira pushed herself off the wall, swaying but standing. "Then we keep moving. We're committed now." She was right. There was no choice but forward. They collected themselves, calmed the horses, and continued into the darkness. The canyon grew narrower still until they had to turn sideways to squeeze through some sections, leaving the horses to follow as best they could. Jonas's torch burned low, the pitch nearly consumed. He lit another from the dying flame. 4 hours after entering the canyon, they saw it. A lighter patch of darkness ahead. The exit. They stumbled toward it like drowning men toward air, no longer cautious, just desperate to be out of that stone tomb. The walls opened up, the ceiling lifted away, and suddenly they were standing under open sky stars, bright above them, fresh wind on their faces. Jonas dropped to his knees, suddenly exhausted beyond measure. Beside him, Nadira collapsed, her wounded leg, finally giving up entirely. Kyle leaned against his horse chest, heaving. "We made it," Jonas said, and started laughing. Exhausted, half-delirious laughter that had nothing to do with humor and everything to do with the raw relief of survival. Nadira joined him, her deep voice mixing with his, both of them laughing like children who'd just escaped some terrible punishment. Even Cale cracked a smile, though his eyes remained watchful. They'd lost another 4 hours in the canyon, but they'd gained distance on swift current, and they were still alive. Jonas stood, helped Nadira to her feet. "How's your leg?" She put weight on it, winced but stayed upright. "I'll live." "Good, because we've got maybe 15 miles to Fort Laramie and I want to be there by noon tomorrow." He looked at the eastern horizon, saw the faintest hint of gray. "Dawn's coming. We rest for an hour, tend the horses, then we ride hard." They found a sheltered spot among some rocks, built a small fire-heated snow for water. Cale used the sulfa powder Ezra had given them on Nadira's wound, rebandaging it with clean cloth. The medicine seemed to help the angry redness fading slightly. Jonas tended to his horse's injury, cleaning the gash, binding it as best he could. The animal would make it to Fort Laramie, but it wouldn't be making any return journey. He'd have to buy or borrow fresh mounts. One more expense he couldn't afford. But he'd worry about that later. As the sun rose, painting the snow in shades of pink and gold, Jonas allowed himself a moment of hope. They were close now. One more day of riding, maybe less. Get the medicine, turn around, ride back to Pine Creek. Get it to Running Wolf in time. They could do this. They had to do this. "Jonas." Cale's voice was tight. He was standing on a rock outcropping, looking back the way they'd come. "We have a problem." Jonas climbed up beside him, looked where Cale was pointing. In the distance, maybe 5 miles back, he could see them. 5 riders moving fast, following their trail. Swift current had found them. Jonas watched the distant riders for a long moment, calculating speeds and distances. Swift current's warriors were fresh. Their horses hadn't just spent 4 hours navigating a death-trap canyon. They'd closed the gap quickly. "How long?" Nadira asked from below. 2 hours. Maybe 3 if we're lucky." Jonas climbed down. "We need to move. Now." They mounted up, abandoning any pretense of rest. The horses were exhausted, especially Jonas's wounded gelding, but they pushed them anyway. There was no choice. The terrain opened up, snow-covered plains broken by occasional stands of trees. Good for making time, bad for cover. Jonas kept checking their back trail, watching those 5 riders grow steadily closer. "We won't make it to Fort Laramie before they catch us," Cale said, stating what they all knew. "No," Jonas agreed. "We won't." "So we fight." Jonas thought about it. 5 trained Apache warriors against 3 exhausted riders, 1 wounded on played-out horses. Even worse odds than before. "We fight," Nadira said, and there was steel in her voice. "I'm done running, done hiding. Let them come." But Jonas was thinking ahead past the immediate problem. Even if they won the fight, even if they somehow killed or drove off 5 warriors, they'd lose time. Hours they couldn't spare. Running Wolf didn't have hours. "There might be another way," Jonas said slowly. "If we split up." "Explain," Cale said. "They're following our trail, all 3 horses together. But if we split, if 2 of us draw them off while 1 continues to Fort Laramie..." He looked at Nadira. "You're the one who needs to get back to Running Wolf. You're the one he trusts. You have to be the one who brings the medicine." Nadira shook her head. "No, I won't leave you to die for me. You won't be leaving us to die. You'll be giving us a reason to stay alive." Jonas managed to smile. "Besides, Cale and I are just as stubborn as you. We'll lead them on a chase, lose them in the hills, circle back to Fort Laramie. Meet you there." "It's a good plan," Cale said. "Swift Current wants Nadira. He won't split his forces. He'll follow the 2 of us, thinking she's with us." Nadira looked between them, conflict clear on her face. Every instinct told her to stay, to fight beside them. But her promise to Running Wolf, her duty to that dying child, was stronger than instinct. "I hate this," she said finally. "I know." Jonas pulled out the map Ezra had given them, showed her the route to Fort Laramie. "Straight east from here, 12 miles. You'll see the fort's flag before you see the walls. Ask for the surgeon, tell him Ezra Cobb sent you. Give him this." He pulled out a small leather pouch from his saddlebag, pressed it into her hand. "It's everything I have left. $40. Not enough for the medicine, but it's a start. Tell the surgeon about Running Wolf about the consumption. Army doctors took an oath to help people. He'll find a way." Nadira's hand closed around the pouch. "What about you? How will you get back?" "We'll figure something out. We always do." Jonas glanced back. The riders were maybe 4 miles away now, close enough that he could make out individual shapes. "You need to go. Now." Nadira leaned down from her horse, grabbed Jonas's coat, pulled him close. She pressed her forehead against his, a gesture of respect and gratitude, and something else he didn't have time to name. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." Then she was gone, kicking her horse into a gallop heading east toward Fort Laramie and hope and the medicine that would save a dying boy. Jonas watched her go, then turned to Kyle. "Ready to make some bad decisions." Kyle's scarred face split into a grin. "I've been making bad decisions my whole life. Might as well make a few more." They headed north away from Nadira's trail, making sure they left clear tracks in the snow. Behind them, Swift Current and his warriors followed, closing the distance with each passing minute. Jonas led them into rougher country, hills and gullies, rock formations that provided cover. He was buying time, nothing more. Couldn't outrun them, couldn't hide from them, could only delay the inevitable. "How do you want to do this?" Kyle asked as they took cover behind a jumble of boulders. Jonas checked his revolver. 6 shots. He had maybe 20 more rounds in his belt. Kyle had his rifle and whatever ammunition he carried, against 5 warriors with bows, rifles, and decades of fighting experience. "We make them think twice about following," Jonas said. "We don't have to kill them all, just make it costly enough that they decide we're not worth the effort." "You think Swift Current will back off?" "No, but his men might, and if enough of them want to quit, he might not have a choice." It wasn't much of a plan, but it was all they had. The warriors appeared 20 minutes later, riding hard, following the tracks Jonas and Kyle had left. They slowed as they approached the boulder field, sensing an ambush. Swift Current raised his hand, stopping his warriors. He studied the terrain, his eyes scanning every shadow, every hiding place. Jonas kept perfectly still, barely breathing. Swift Current called out in Apache, his voice carrying across the snow. Kale translated in a whisper. "He's offering terms. Says if we give up Nadira's location, he'll let us live." "Tell him to go to hell," Jonas whispered back. Kyle called back in Apache, his tone making the translation unnecessary. Swift Current's face darkened. The lead warrior made a gesture. 3 of his men dismounted, began working their way forward on foot, using the terrain for cover. 2 stayed mounted, bows ready, watching for any movement. Jonas aimed carefully, waiting. He needed to make the first shot count. Needed to show these warriors that this fight would cost them blood. One of the warriors moved from behind a rock, exposed for just a second. Jonas fired. The warrior dropped, clutching his shoulder, not dead, but definitely out of the fight. Chaos erupted. The mounted warriors returned fire, arrows hissing through the air. Jonas and Kyle ducked as arrows struck the rocks around them, sending stone chips flying. Kyle fired his rifle, the boom echoing across the hills. Another warrior went down, this one not getting back up. 4 left. But Jonas and Kyle had just revealed their position. The remaining warriors converged on their hiding spot, moving with practiced coordination, covering each other as they advanced. "Time to move," Jonas said. They scrambled backward, keeping the boulders between them and the approaching warriors, working their way deeper into the hill country. Arrows and bullets followed them, whining off rocks, kicking up snow. Something punched into Jonas's side, a burning line of pain. He looked down, saw blood, realized an arrow had grazed him. Not deep, but it hurt like fire. They reached a narrow ravine, dropped down into it, pressed themselves against the wall as warriors appeared at the edge above them. More arrows came down, but the angle was bad, most missing or glancing off stone. "We can't stay here," Kale said. "They'll circle around, trap us." Jonas nodded, breath coming hard. The ravine ran for maybe 50 yards, then opened onto a steep slope covered in loose rock and snow. Dangerous footing, but it was their only way out. They ran, feet sliding on loose stone, each step threatening to turn into a fall. Behind them, warriors dropped into the ravine, giving chase. Jonas reached the slope first, started climbing. The loose rock shifted under his boots, starting small slides. He grabbed for handholds, pulled himself up. Beside him, Cale did the same. An arrow struck the rock beside Jonas's hand close enough that he felt the wind of its passage. He looked back, saw Swift Current standing in the ravine below, drawing another arrow, taking careful aim. Time seemed to slow. Jonas saw the arrow release, saw it arc toward him. He tried to move, but his feet slipped on loose stone. The arrow was coming straight at his chest, and there was nothing he could do. Then Cale was there, shoving Jonas aside. The arrow meant for Jonas took Cale in the shoulder instead, punching through leather and flesh, the point emerging bloody from his back. Cale grunted, stumbled, but kept his feet. Jonas grabbed him, pulled him up the slope. More arrows followed, but the warriors were shooting uphill now. Accuracy degraded by angle and distance. They reached the top of the slope, collapsed on flat ground. Jonas quickly examined Cale's wound. The arrow had gone clean through, missing anything vital, but Cale was bleeding heavily. "Why did you do that?" Jonas demanded, already working to break off the arrow shaft. "Because you need to get back to Pine Creek. Need to help Nadira save that boy." Cale's voice was tight with pain. "I've got nothing left to live for. My wife is dead. My brother is dead. My father is a monster. But you've got a second chance. Don't waste it." "You've got plenty to live for," Jonas said, binding the wound as best he could. "Like seeing your father face justice. Like making sure that ledger gets to the federal authorities. Like building something better than what came before." Cale managed a weak smile. "You sound like a preacher." "I'm just a man who's made too many mistakes to let you make the same ones." Jonas looked back. The warriors had retreated, regrouping. He'd hit one, Cale had killed another. 3 left, plus Swift Current himself. Better odds, but still bad. More importantly, they'd bought time. Time for Nadira to reach Fort Laramie. Time for her to get the medicine and start back to Pine Creek. "Can you ride?" Jonas asked. Cale nodded, though his face was gray with blood loss. "I can ride." Their horses had wandered during the fight, but not far. Jonas caught them, helped Cale mount. The warrior swayed in the saddle but stayed upright. They rode east away from Swift Current and his remaining men. Jonas kept checking behind them, but no pursuit came. Either the warriors were tending their wounded, or they'd decided the price was too high. By late afternoon they saw it. The flag of Fort Laramie flying above wooden walls. The largest military installation in Dakota Territory. Safety. They rode through the gates, 2 exhausted men on played-out horses, both bleeding, both barely conscious. Soldiers surrounded them, helping them dismount, calling for the surgeon. As Jonas's vision started to gray at the edges, he saw her. Nadira standing near the surgeon's building, holding a leather satchel. She saw him, relief flooding her face, and started toward him. Jonas tried to stay upright, tried to tell her it was okay that they'd made it, but his legs wouldn't hold him anymore. He felt himself falling, felt strong hands catch him before he hit the ground. The last thing he saw before darkness took him was Nadira's face, tears streaming down her cheeks, and the leather satchel in her hands, the one that held streptomycin, the one that meant Running Wolf would live. Jonas woke to the smell of carbolic acid and the sound of low voices. He was lying on a cot in a whitewashed room, sunlight streaming through a window. Every part of his body hurt. "He's awake." Nadira's voice soft and close. Jonas opened his eyes, found her sitting beside the cot. She looked better than last time he'd seen her, cleaned up her wounds properly, dressed the infection in her leg, finally responding to treatment. Still exhausted, but the desperate edge was gone from her eyes. "How long?" Jonas's voice came out as a croak. 8 hours. The surgeon said you needed rest more than anything. You've lost blood, got a cracked rib from the rock slide, and that arrow graze is infected." Nadira held up a cup of water. "But you'll live." Jonas drank gratefully, then asked the question that mattered. "The medicine?" Nadira held up the leather satchel. "Got it. Full course of streptomycin, enough for 10 days of treatment. The surgeon tried to charge me $300. I only had your 80. But then I told him about Running Wolf, about the consumption, about how we'd ridden 3 days to get here." She smiled. "And I mentioned Ezra Cobb's name. Turns out the surgeon owed Ezra his life from some incident 5 years ago. He gave me the medicine for free." Relief flooded through Jonas. "So, we can get back to Pine Creek." We can, but not yet. Nadira gestured to the door. You need to see this. She helped him stand, led him outside. The fort was busy with morning activity soldiers going about their duties. But near the main gate Jonas saw a group of men in chains. Apache warriors. He recognized them. Swift Current and his remaining men. A U.S. Army captain stood nearby supervising. Jonas limped over Nadira, supporting him. What happened? Jonas asked. The captain turned. These men attacked federal scouts. That's a hanging offense. They'll be transferred to Fort Laramie's stockade held for trial. He looked at Jonas's battered condition. From what the surgeon tells me, they attacked you too. You'll need to give a statement. They were following orders, Jonas said, from the Gray Wind tribal chieftain. He's the real criminal. The captain's eyes sharpened. You have proof of that? Jonas looked at Nadira, who nodded. She pulled out the folded papers Cale had given her. The healer's confession, the weapons ledger, all the proof they needed of Gray Wind's crimes. More than proof, Jonas said. We have documentation of treason, murder, and illegal weapons trafficking. The chieftain sold rifles to the army while simultaneously ordering the massacre of his own people to cover it up. The captain took the papers, read them carefully. His expression grew darker with each page. This is extensive. If this is accurate, we're talking about a major corruption case, possibly the biggest breach of trust in Army-tribal relations in a decade. He looked at Jonas and Nadira. I'll need to forward this to the territorial governor. There will be investigations. You'll both need to testify. We will, Nadira said. But first we have to get back to Pine Creek. A child's life depends on it. The captain nodded. I'll give you an escort. 6 men, fresh horses. You'll ride under federal protection. And if your story checks out, if these documents are authentic, you'll both have the gratitude of the United States government. Don't want gratitude, Jonas said. Just want to save a kid. The captain almost smiled. Spoken like a man who's been through hell and came out the other side. Give me an hour to arrange the escort. In the meantime, get some food. Get your wounds checked one more time, and... He gestured to Swift Current, who was glaring at them with hatred in his eyes. You might want to say your piece to him. Once he's convicted, you won't get another chance. Jonas walked over to where Swift Current stood in chains. The warrior looked at him with undisguised contempt. You have destroyed everything, Swift Current said in halting English. My chieftain, my tribe, my honor. Your chieftain destroyed himself when he murdered 30 innocent women, Jonas replied. Your tribe will be better off without him. And honor. There's no honor in following evil orders. You do not understand our ways. I understand that killing is killing no matter what justification you wrap it in. Jonas looked at the warrior steadily. You could have stopped. Any time in the last 3 days you could have turned around, gone home, refused to be part of this. But you didn't. You chose to keep hunting an innocent woman and a dying child. So don't talk to me about honor. Swift Current's jaw tightened, but he said nothing more. Jonas turned away, found Cale sitting on a bench near the barracks. The warrior's shoulder was bandaged, his arm in a sling, but he was alive. The fort surgeon had declared the wound clean. He'd recover fully within a month. Thank you, Jonas said simply, for taking that arrow meant for me. Cale shrugged with his good shoulder. Thank me by making sure that boy lives, and by making sure my father pays for what he's done. Both of those are guaranteed, Jonas said. You coming back to Pine Creek with us? Eventually. But first I need to go back to the tribe. Need to help the council transition to new leadership, make sure the women who supported Nadira don't face retaliation. Cale looked at Nadira. Your fight is over, sister. Mine is just beginning. Nadira embraced him carefully, mindful of his wounded shoulder. You are my brother in every way that matters. When you need help, call for me. I will come. I know you will. That's why I can do what needs doing, because I know I'm not alone anymore. An hour later, Jonas and Nadira rode out of Fort Laramie with a 6-man military escort. Fresh horses, full saddlebags, and most importantly, the leather satchel with enough streptomycin to save Running Wolf's life. They rode hard, covering in one day what had taken them nearly 2 on the way there. The soldiers were good riders, the horses were strong, and desperation lent them all speed. By nightfall they were 20 miles from Pine Creek. By dawn they'd be there. Jonas rode beside Nadira, watching the way she kept checking the satchel, making sure it was still secure, still safe. She'd been doing that every 10 minutes since they left Fort Laramie. "He's going to be fine," Jonas said. "You don't know that. It's been 2.5 days. Dr. Pritchard said he had maybe 3 days total." Nadira's voice was tight. "We might be too late." "We're not too late. We're exactly on time. Have faith." "Faith in what?" "In God. In fate. I stopped believing in those a long time ago." "Then have faith in his will to survive," Jonas said. "That boy is determined enough to hold on. He's got you for a sister. He learned from the best." Nadira almost smiled. Almost. They rode through the night, torches lighting their way, the military escort keeping perfect formation around them. As dawn broke, they saw it. The smoke from Pine Creek's chimneys. The familiar buildings. Home. They galloped into town, scattering chickens and drawing startled looks from early risers, followed Hart in his throat. Dr. Pritchard's office horses sliding to a stop outside. Nadira was off her horse before it fully stopped, limping to the door, throwing it open. Jonas followed Hart in his throat. Dr. Pritchard was there, looking exhausted, dark circles under his eyes. He looked up as they entered, and something in his expression made Jonas's stomach drop. "We have the medicine," Nadira said, holding up the satchel. "We made it. Where is he?" Pritchard stood slowly. Come with me." He led them to the back room. Running Wolf lay on a cot so still he might have been dead. His skin had a gray pallor. His breathing was barely visible, but his eyes were open, looking at the ceiling with that 1,000-yard stare of the very sick. Nadira fell to her knees beside him, taking his small hand in hers. "Little brother, I'm here. I brought the medicine. You're going to be okay." Running Wolf's eyes moved to her face. He tried to speak, but only a wheeze came out. "Don't talk," Nadira said, tears streaming down her face. "Save your strength. Dr. Pritchard is going to give you medicine now. You're going to get better." Pritchard was already preparing the injection, measuring out the streptomycin with practiced hands. "This is going to hurt, son, but it's going to save your life." He administered the shot. Running Wolf flinched but made no sound. Within minutes his breathing seemed to ease slightly. Not much, but enough to notice. "It'll take a few hours to really start working," Pritchard said, "and he'll need injections twice a day for the next 10 days. But if he's made it this long, he's got the will to survive. The medicine will do the rest." Nadira stayed by Running Wolf's side, holding his hand, whispering to him in Apache. Jonas watched from the doorway, feeling something tight in his chest ease for the first time in days. They'd done it. Against impossible odds, through enemy territory, hunted by warriors and nearly killed by the land itself, they'd gotten the medicine. They'd saved a child's life. It was such a small victory in the grand scheme of things. One child in a world full of dying children. But it was their victory. And right now, in this moment, it was everything. 3 days passed in Pine Creek like a held breath, slowly released. Running Wolf improved. Not quickly, not miraculously, but steadily. The streptomycin worked through his small body, fighting the infection that had been killing him. By the 2nd day, color returned to his cheeks. By the 3rd, he could sit up and take broth. By the 4th, he smiled at Nadira and called her sister in a voice that didn't rattle with fluid. Jonas watched it happen from a chair in Dr. Pritchard's office, his own wounds healing slower than he'd like, but healing nonetheless. The cracked rib made breathing an adventure. The infected arrow graze on his side had required more sulfa powder and daily cleaning. But he was alive, and that was more than he'd expected several times over the past week. Nadira never left Running Wolf's side except to sleep, and even then she slept on the floor beside his cot. Jonas understood. After fighting so hard to save someone, you didn't trust the universe not to take them away the moment you looked elsewhere. On the morning of the 5th day, a contingent from Fort Laramie arrived. 20 soldiers, 2 officers, and a man in a dark suit who introduced himself as Federal Marshal William Hendricks. "Miss Stormborn," the marshal said, his voice carrying the flat authority of law. "Mr. Coulter, I'm here to follow up on the documents you provided to Captain Morrison. We need your testimony regarding the Grey Wind massacre and the alleged crimes of Chieftain Grey Wind." They met in Pine Creek's church, the only building large enough to hold everyone who wanted to attend. The entire town turned out, along with a delegation from the Grey Wind tribe. Jonas recognized several of the Apache women who'd come, led by Ama Brightsong, the elder woman who'd helped Nadira escape execution. The marshal set up at the front of the church a makeshift court. He'd brought a stenographer to record everything, a clerk to manage documents, and enough military presence to ensure order. "This is not a trial," Marshal Hendricks announced to the assembled crowd. "This is a federal inquiry into allegations of murder, treason, and corruption. Miss Stormborn, please come forward." Nadira stood her height, making several people in the front pews lean back. She walked to the front with her head high, shoulders back, every inch the warrior she'd been trained to be. "State your name for the record." "Nadira Stormborn, daughter of Singing Water, adopted daughter of Chieftain Grey Wind of the Grey Wind Apache. Tell us in your own words what you witnessed on the night of the massacre 13 years ago." Nadira took a breath, then spoke. Her voice was steady, clear, giving the facts without emotion. She described the gathering of women, their discovery of the illegal weapons, Grey Wind's arrival with his warriors. She described the systematic killing, the way they blamed it on white outlaws, the cover-up that followed. "And you saw Chieftain Grey Wind give the order to kill these women." "I did. I was 15 years old, hiding in brush 20 feet away. I heard every word. I saw every death." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The marshal held up his hand for silence. "Why didn't you come forward at the time?" "Because I was a child. Because Grey Wind adopted me the next day and made it clear that if I spoke, he would kill every other child who'd lost a mother that night. I stayed silent to protect them." The marshal consulted his notes. "And when did you decide to stop being silent?" "When my husband, Black Eagle, tried to beat a child to death. When I pushed him away and he fell to his death. When I realized the tribe would execute me for killing a monster rather than admit what that monster was." Nadira's voice hardened. "I decided that if I was going to die anyway, the truth should die with me. So I ran, and I found people who believed the truth was worth protecting." She looked at Jonas as she said it. He met her eyes, nodded once. The marshal called Jonas next. He limped to the front, his side aching with each step. "Mr. Coulter, you're a bounty hunter by trade. Is that correct?" "Was. Don't think I'll be taking any more bounties after this." A few chuckles from the crowd. The marshal didn't smile. "You were offered $5,000 for Miss Stormborn, dead or alive. Yet you chose to help her instead. Why?" Jonas thought about how to answer that. How to explain the weight of Sarah's death, the debt he owed to children he'd never met, the way Nadira's desperate hope had reminded him what it felt like to care about something more than survival. "Because it was the right thing to do," he said finally. "And I'd spent too long doing the wrong things for the right reasons. Seemed like time to try it the other way around." "Did you at any point verify Miss Stormborn's story?" "I verified that she was willing to die to protect a child who wasn't hers. I verified that warriors were hunting her to silence her, not to bring her to justice. And I verified that the wanted poster on her mentioned the Grey Wind massacre in handwriting that wasn't part of the original print." Jonas pulled out the worn poster, handed it to the marshal. "Someone wanted the truth found. I just helped it along." The marshal examined the poster, particularly the added notation at the bottom. "We'll need to determine who added this information, but it corroborates Miss Stormborn's claim that others knew the truth." He called Ama Brightsong next. The elder woman walked to the front with dignified slowness, her weathered face impassive. "Mrs. Brightsong, you're a respected elder of the Grey Wind tribe. Did you know about the massacre?" "I suspected. Many of us suspected." Ama's voice was quiet but firm. "The timing was too convenient. The accused outlaws were found and killed too quickly, and 30 women, all of whom had been asking dangerous questions, all died in one night. It was not coincidence. Why didn't you speak up? Because I am a coward. Amma said it without shame, just simple truth. Because I had a son still living and I feared for his life. Because gray wind ruled through fear, and fear is a powerful silence. What changed? Nadira changed. She showed us that silence protects nothing but evil. She showed us that one person standing alone can be braver than 100 people standing together in fear. Amma looked at Nadira. She is what we should have been 13 years ago. The marshal spent the next hour reviewing the documents. The healer's report detailing wounds consistent with tribal weapons. The ledger showing years of weapons sales to the army, prices paid, quantities delivered. Each entry in Gray Wind's own hand. Finally, he called for a recess. The crowd filed out, buzzing with conversation. Jonas found Nadira outside, leaning against the church wall, eyes closed. "You did good in there," Jonas said. "I told the truth. That's all. Sometimes that's the hardest thing to do." Nadira opened her eyes. "What happens now?" "Now the marshal makes his recommendation to the territorial governor. If he finds sufficient evidence, Gray Wind will be arrested, tried in federal court. Could take months, could take years. And in the meantime, Running Wolf and I are under federal protection. The marshal made that clear. Anyone who comes after you answers to the U.S. government." Jonas smiled slightly. "You're probably safer now than you've ever been." Nadira didn't look reassured. "I won't feel safe until Gray Wind faces justice, until every person who died that night has their truth told." "They will. You've made sure of that." Before Nadira could respond, one of the soldiers approached. "Mr. Coulter, there's someone here to see you. Says his name is Silas Crow." Jonas felt his stomach drop. Silas Crow. The loan shark. The man who held the deed to his land if Jonas couldn't pay his debts. In all the chaos of the past week, he'd almost forgotten. Almost. Silas stood near the general store, a thin man in an expensive coat, his face sharp as a hatchet. He smiled when he saw Jonas, but there was no warmth in it. "Mr. Coulter, heard you had quite the adventure, riding to Fort Laramie, fighting Apache warriors, saving a dying child. Very heroic." "What do you want, Silas?" "What I've always wanted. My money. $6,000 due 3 days ago, which means as of this morning your ranch belongs to me." He pulled out a document, unfolded it. "All legal, all proper. I've already filed the paperwork with the Territorial Land Office." Jonas had known this was coming. Had known the moment he chose to help Nadira instead of collecting her bounty that he was choosing to lose everything he owned. But knowing didn't make it easier. "The ranch is yours," Jonas said quietly. "I'll clear out my things by end of week." Silas's smile widened. "Oh, I don't think so. You see, during your absence I took the liberty of examining the property. Found some interesting things. Survey markers showing your land extends 50 acres further than you thought. Good timberland worth at least another $1,000. Which means the total value of what you owe me is now $7,000. That's not how loans work. We agreed on $6,000. We agreed on $6,000 plus interest and penalties for late payment. All spelled out in the contract you signed." Silas pulled out another document. "You're a bounty hunter, Mr. Coulter, not a lawyer. You should have read the fine print." Jonas felt rage building in his chest, hot and fierce. "You're a goddamn thief. I'm a businessman, and you're a man who made poor choices." Silas tucked the documents away. "I'll give you 2 days to vacate. After that I'll have the sheriff remove you." He walked away whistling, leaving Jonas standing there with fists clenched and jaw tight. Nadira appeared beside him. "I heard. I'm sorry." "Not your fault. I made my choice. A choice to save Running Wolf's life. A choice that cost you everything." Nadira was quiet for a moment. "There has to be something we can do." "There isn't. I signed a contract. The law's on his side." "Then the law is wrong." Jonas almost laughed. "You're not wrong, but wrong or right, I still have to leave." He started walking back toward Dr. Pritchard's office, Nadira following. His mind was already working on logistics. Where would he go? What would he do? Everything he'd built for the past 4 years gone because he'd chosen to help instead of collect a bounty. Number. Not gone because he'd helped. Gone because he'd borrowed money from a snake and hadn't read the fine print. This was his own fault. They found Running Wolf sitting up in bed, color fully returned to his face, eating solid food for the first time in a week. He smiled when he saw them. "Sister, Ghost Man." The boy's voice was still weak but clear. "The doctor says I can leave soon. Says I'm getting better." Nadira sat beside him, taking his hand. "You are getting better. And yes, we'll leave soon. We'll find a place to live, just you and me. Can Ghost Man come with us?" Nadira and Jonas exchanged glances. Jonas hadn't thought that far ahead, hadn't let himself think about what came after Pine Creek, after the inquiry, after everything. "Ghost Man has his own path," Nadira said gently, "but we'll always be his friends." Running Wolf looked disappointed but nodded. Then, with the directness of children, he asked, "Are you sad, Ghost Man? You look sad." Jonas knelt beside the bed, managed to smile. "I'm not sad. I'm glad you're better. That's all that matters. Sister says you saved my life, that you rode very far to get medicine. Your sister did most of the work. I just went along for the ride. Will you tell me about it? About the adventure?" Jonas looked at Nadira, who nodded. So he told the boy a edited version. About the canyon, about meeting Ezra Cobb, about the fight with the warriors. He left out the worst parts, the moments they'd thought they wouldn't make it, the times they'd been sure they'd fail. Running Wolf listened with wide eyes, occasionally asking questions. By the time Jonas finished, the boy was yawning, exhaustion from his illness catching up. "Rest," Nadira said softly. "We'll be here when you wake." As Running Wolf drifted off to sleep, Dr. Pritchard pulled Jonas aside. "I heard about your situation with Silas Crow. The whole town's talking about it. News travels fast. In a town this small, everything travels fast." Pritchard hesitated. "There might be a way to help. The town council met this afternoon. We took a vote." "A vote on what?" "On whether Pine Creek owes you a debt. You saved a child's life, helped expose a corrupt tribal leader, and did it all while protecting this town from becoming a battleground." Pritchard smiled. "The vote was unanimous. We're offering you a reward. $2,000 raised from the community fund and private donations." Jonas stared. That's too much. I didn't do it for money." "We know. That's why we want to give it to you. It won't cover your entire debt, but it's a start." $2,000. Combined with what he had left, maybe $300 after buying supplies and horses, that would be $2,300. Still short by $4,700. "I appreciate it, Doc, but it's not enough. Silas won't negotiate. He wants the land, not the money." "Then maybe we negotiate for you." Pritchard's eyes gleamed. "Let me talk to a few people. Don't give up yet, Jonas. You've got more friends in this town than you know." That evening, as Jonas sat outside the doctor's office watching the sun set, Marshal Hendricks approached. "Mr. Coulter, got the preliminary report from the territorial governor. Based on the evidence presented, federal warrants will be issued for the arrest of Chieftain Gray Wind and 3 of his senior warriors. They'll be brought to trial within 3 months. That's good news." "It is. And there's more. The governor is offering a reward for information leading to the arrest. $5,000 to be split among those who provided evidence." The marshal handed Jonas an envelope. "Your share comes to $2,500. Jonas opened the envelope, found a bank draft inside. $2,500, combined with the town's reward and what he had left, that would be $4,800. Still $1,200 short. So close, but not close enough. "Thank you, Marshal." "Thank you, Mr. Coulter. What you did took real courage, the kind that's rare these days." The marshal tipped his hat and walked away. Jonas sat there holding the bank draft, doing math in his head over and over, hoping the numbers would somehow change. They didn't. He was still going to lose his ranch. The next morning, Jonas went to the ranch to start packing. He hadn't been back since leaving for Fort Laramie over a week ago. The cabin looked the same, sturdy and plain, but it felt different, like it already belonged to someone else. He was loading his few possessions into saddlebags when he heard horses approaching. Multiple riders. He turned to see Silas Crow arriving with two men Jonas didn't recognize, both wearing guns and hard expressions. "Starting your packing, I see. Good." Silas dismounted. "These are my associates. They'll be staying here to ensure you don't damage any property on your way out." "I'm not a thief, Silas." "No, you're just a fool. A fool who gave up a fortune to save some Indian kid." Silas walked around the cabin, inspecting it like he was already planning renovations. "I'll tear this down, build something proper. Maybe a ranch house with real glass windows. This place will finally be worth something." Jonas felt his hands curl into fists but forced them to relax. Violence wouldn't solve anything, would only make things worse. "You've got until sundown tomorrow," Silas said. "Then you're trespassing." Jonas packed in silence while Silas and his men watched. Everything he owned fit into 2 saddlebags and a bedroll. 4 years of work reduced to that. He was cinching the last bag when he heard more horses. A lot of them. He looked up to see a group of riders approaching. 30, maybe 40 people. Jonas recognized faces from Pine Creek. Ranchers, shopkeepers, the blacksmith, the preacher. Dr. Pritchard rode at the front, and beside him, Nadira. They formed a semicircle around the cabin, not threatening but definitely present. Silas's 2 hired men shifted nervously. "What's this?" Silas demanded. "Some kind of mob." "Not a mob," Dr. Pritchard said mildly. "Just concerned citizens. We've come to discuss a business proposition." "I don't do business with mobs." "Then you'll do business with me." A new voice, unfamiliar. An older man rode forward, well-dressed, sitting his horse with easy confidence. "My name is Charles Brennan. I own the Territorial Bank in Deadwood. Dr. Pritchard sent me a telegram explaining the situation." Silas's eyes narrowed. "This doesn't concern you." "On the contrary, it concerns me greatly. You hold a note on Mr. Coulter's property for $6,000, correct? $7,000 with penalties and interest." "$6,000, Brennan said firmly. "I've reviewed your contract. The penalty clauses are unconscionable and likely unenforceable. But let's not argue legalities. I'm prepared to purchase Mr. Coulter's debt from you, right now. $6,000 cash money." Silas laughed. "Why would I sell? The land is worth more than that." "Because if you don't sell, I'll make it my personal mission to destroy your business. I'll call in every loan you have outstanding with my bank. I'll spread word through every financial institution in the territory that you're a predatory lender who preys on decent men. By the time I'm done, you won't be able to borrow a dime from here to San Francisco." The smile faded from Silas's face. "You can't do that." "I can, and I will. I've built a reputation on fairness and honesty. You've built yours on greed and exploitation. Which do you think other bankers will believe?" Brennan pulled out a leather wallet. $6,000. Take it or leave it. But if you leave it, I promise you'll regret it." Silas looked at the crowd, at the hostile faces, at Jonas standing there with nothing left to lose. Finally, he spit in the dirt. "Fine. Give me the money." The transaction took 20 minutes. Brennan counted out cash, Silas signed over the note, and just like that, Jonas's debt changed hands. As Silas and his men rode away, Jonas approached Brennan. "Why did you do that?" "Because Dr. Pritchard explained what you did. How you gave up everything to save a child's life. That kind of character is rare." Brennan handed Jonas the note. "Now about this debt. I'm restructuring it. $5,000 payable over 10 years at 3% interest. First payment not due for 6 months. That gives you time to get back on your feet." Jonas stared at the paper. I don't know what to say." "Say you'll rebuild. Say you'll keep being the kind of man who does the right thing even when it costs him." Brennan smiled. "This territory needs more men like you, Mr. Coulter. I'm investing in that." The crowd began to disperse, people coming by to shake Jonas's hand, to clap him on the shoulder, to tell him they were glad he was staying. The sudden reversal of fortune left Jonas overwhelmed, unable to fully process what had just happened. Nadira was the last to approach. She looked at the cabin, at the land, at Jonas standing there still trying to understand what had happened. "You have your home back," she said. "I do, thanks to a lot of good people. Thanks to you being worth saving." Nadira was quiet for a moment. "Running Wolf asked me this morning where we would live. I didn't have an answer. But now I'm wondering, would you have room for 2 more? Jonas looked at her, at this woman who'd been through hell and come out the other side stronger for it. At the warrior who'd learned to be gentle, at the giant who'd learned she didn't have to be alone. "I'd have room for 100 more if they were you and him." Nadira smiled, a real smile, the kind that reached her eyes and made her look 10 years younger. "Then I accept, on one condition." "What's that?" "We build an addition. That cabin's too small for 3 people, especially when one of them is 7 feet tall." Jonas laughed, and it felt good, like something tight in his chest had finally loosened. "Deal." The next weeks passed in a blur of sawdust and sweat. Neighbors came to help raise the new walls. Running Wolf's laughter returned as his strength grew, and slowly, almost without noticing, Jonas and Nadira built something neither had dared to hope for: a home. 2 months later, Pine Creek looked the same, but felt different. Spring was coming, melting the snow, turning the world from white to brown, to the first tentative green. Running Wolf was fully recovered, running around the expanded cabin like he'd never been sick at all. The addition was half-built, new logs raised beside the old cabin, creating space for separate bedrooms. Jonas worked on it most days alongside volunteers from town who came to help. Nadira worked too, her strength making her invaluable for lifting beams and setting posts. They'd fallen into a routine. Jonas handled the heavier ranch work, tending the few head of cattle he'd managed to keep, repairing fences damaged by winter. Nadira hunted, bringing back deer and elk, teaching Running Wolf how to track and read signs. The boy was thriving, learning both Apache and English, learning to live between 2 worlds. On a morning in early April, a rider came from Fort Laramie, a young soldier with a dispatch case. "Message for Miss Nadira Stormborn and Mr. Jonas Coulter." Nadira took the sealed letter, opened it carefully. Jonas watched her face as she read, saw her expression shift from curiosity to satisfaction to something like vindication. "Gray Wind has been arrested," she said quietly. "He's being held at Fort Laramie awaiting trial. The letter says they found him trying to flee into Mexico. He didn't go quietly. Killed 1 soldier, wounded 2 others before they subdued him." "When's the trial?" 3 weeks. They want us to testify." Nadira looked at Jonas. "Both of us. Then we'll go. Finish what we started." The soldier cleared his throat. "There's more, ma'am. The Gray Wind tribe has a new council, led by women mostly. They sent this." He handed her a second letter. This one was written in Apache, but there was an English translation attached. Jonas read over Nadira's shoulder. The letter was from Amma Brightsong and the other tribal elders. It formally cleared Nadira of all charges related to Black Eagle's death, ruled it justifiable self-defense. It invited her to return to the tribe if she wished, promised her a place of honor, but the last paragraph made Jonas pause. "We understand you have found a new home among the white settlers. We respect this choice, but know that you will always be welcome among us. You are Apache. That will never change. And when you are ready, we hope you will teach our young women what you have learned. How to stand strong, how to speak truth, how to be warriors not just of the body, but of the spirit." Nadira folded the letter carefully, her hands shaking slightly. "They want me to come back. Do you want to go?" "I don't know. Part of me does. It's my home, my people, my culture. But another part." She looked at the cabin, at Running Wolf playing in the yard, at Jonas standing beside her. "Another part has found a different home. One I chose rather than one I was born into. You don't have to choose right now, or ever. You can be both, Apache and settler, warrior and woman, sister and friend." Jonas smiled. "You're big enough to be all of it." Nadira laughed, that deep, warm sound he'd come to love hearing. "Was that a joke about my height?" "Maybe." She punched his shoulder, not hard but enough to make him stagger. They'd grown comfortable with each other over the past months, the boundaries between them blurring from strangers to friends to something neither had quite named yet. 3 weeks later they rode to Fort Laramie for the trial. Running Wolf stayed with Dr. Pritchard, who'd become something like a grandfather to the boy. The military escort was smaller this time, just 4 soldiers, but still enough to ensure safe passage. The trial took place in the fort's largest building, the mess hall converted into a courtroom. A federal judge had been brought in from Cheyenne along with a prosecutor and a court recorder. Gray Wind sat at a table in chains flanked by guards, his face a mask of contempt. The courtroom was packed. Army officers, settlers from surrounding towns, Apache from multiple tribes who'd come to see justice done. Kyle Windrider was there, his shoulder healed, sitting with a group of young Apache men and women who looked to him for leadership. The trial lasted 3 days. Witnesses testified to Gray Wind's crimes, the healer who'd treated the massacre victims, warriors who'd carried out his orders, women who'd been threatened into silence. Each testimony built a picture of systematic corruption and violence. On the second day, Nadira took the stand. She told her story again calmly and clearly. The prosecutor asked questions, the defense attorney tried to poke holes in her testimony, but her account never wavered. "And you're certain it was Chieftain Gray Wind who ordered the killings?" "I'm certain. I was 20 feet away. I heard every word. I watched him point to each woman and give the order to kill them. I watched them die." Gray Wind erupted from his seat. "Lies, all lies. This woman is a murderer trying to save herself." The judge banged his gavel. "Sit down, or you'll be removed from your own trial." Gray Wind sat, but his eyes burned with hatred as he glared at Nadira. On the third day, the prosecutor rested his case. The defense called no witnesses. Gray Wind's attorney argued that the evidence was circumstantial, that Nadira's testimony was suspect, given her own criminal history, that the ledger could have been forged. But the jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Guilty on all counts: murder, treason, corruption, weapons trafficking. The judge sentenced Gray Wind to life imprisonment at a federal penitentiary. No possibility of parole. He would die in chains. As the guards led him away, Gray Wind stopped in front of Nadira. For a moment they faced each other, the man who'd raised her and the woman who'd destroyed him. "You have doomed our people," Gray Wind said in Apache. "Without strong leadership, the tribe will be crushed by the white man's world." "You were not strong leadership," Nadira replied in the same language. "You were a tyrant, and our people will be stronger without you. Amma and the other women will lead with wisdom instead of fear, with honor instead of corruption. You didn't doom the tribe. You saved them from yourself." Gray Wind's face twisted with rage, but the guards pulled him away before he could respond. Nadira watched him go, feeling nothing but relief that a long nightmare was finally over. Outside the courthouse, Cale approached. "Justice is done, sister." "It is, but it doesn't bring back the dead." "No, but it honors them. Your mother, my wife, all the others. They can rest now knowing the truth was told and heard." Amma Brightsong joined them, the old woman moving slowly but with dignity. "The tribe wants you to come home, child. We need you." Nadira shook her head gently. "I have a home, a family, a life I chose, but I will visit. I will teach your young women what I know. I will help however I can, just not by living there." Amma studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "You have grown wise as well as strong. Your mother would be proud." They stayed at Fort Laramie for 2 more days, finalizing paperwork, giving additional statements. On the morning they prepared to leave, Marshal Hendricks approached with a final envelope. "Federal reward for testimony leading to conviction. $5,000 split between the 3 primary witnesses. Your share is $1,500. He handed Jonas the envelope. "Use it well." $1,500. More than Jonas had ever had at one time. Combined with what he'd managed to save over the winter, it would be enough to buy breeding stock to expand the ranch to build a real future. They rode back to Pine Creek in comfortable silence, each lost in their own thoughts. The world had changed in the past 3 months. They'd changed. But somehow, through all the chaos and violence and desperate rides through winter, they'd found something worth keeping. Each other. A week after their return, Jonas was working on the cabin addition when Nadira approached. She'd been quiet since the trial, processing everything that had happened. "I've been thinking," she said, about what we are, what this is." She gestured between them. "You gave me shelter when I had none, protected me when I was hunted, risked everything to save Running Wolf. And now we live together, work together, but we're not. What are we, Jonas?" Jonas set down his hammer, turned to face her fully. It was a question he had been avoiding asking himself, afraid of the answer. "I don't know," he admitted. "I know you're the bravest person I've ever met. I know I'd rather work beside you than sleep easy at night. I know that when I think about the future, you're in it." He paused. "But I also know you've spent your whole life being told who to be, who to marry, how to live. I won't be another man telling you what you should do." Nadira smiled. "What if I want someone to tell me what they want? What if I'm tired of making all the decisions alone? Then I want—" Jonas took a breath. "I want to build a life with you. Not because you owe me anything, not because you need protection or shelter, but because when you're not here the cabin feels empty, because your laugh makes hard days easier, because I've never met anyone who makes me want to be better than I am." That's a lot of wants. It is, but only if you want them too. Nadira was quiet, looking at the cabin, at the land, at Jonas standing there with his heart in his hands. Then she stepped forward, took those hands in hers. Her hands were twice the size of his, calloused and strong but gentle. "I want them too," she said quietly. "I want a life we choose together. I want to raise Running Wolf in a home full of love instead of fear. I want to wake up every morning knowing I'm not alone anymore." She smiled. "And I want to marry you, Jonas Coulter, if you'll have a 7-foot Apache woman who comes with more trouble than dowry." Jonas laughed, joy surging through him from somewhere deep inside. "I'll have you exactly as you are, trouble and all." They were married a month later in Pine Creek's church, the same place where Nadira had testified against Gray Wind. The whole town turned out, along with a delegation from the Gray Wind tribe led by Amma and Kael. Dr. Pritchard gave Nadira away. Running Wolf stood beside Jonas, trying to look serious in his new clothes. The ceremony was simple. Jonas wore his cleanest shirt. Nadira wore a dress borrowed from one of the ranch wives, altered to fit her height. The preacher read from Scripture, asked them to make their vows. "Do you, Jonas Coulter, take this woman to be your wife, to have and to hold in sickness and health, for richer or poorer, as long as you both shall live?" "I do." "And do you, Nadira Stormborn, take this man to be your husband under the same vows?" "I do." "Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Dakota and the United States of America, I pronounce you husband and wife." They kissed, and the church erupted in applause. Running Wolf whooped, forgetting to be serious. Amma wiped tears from her eyes. Even Kael smiled his scarred smile. The reception was held at the ranch tables set up outside the finished cabin. There was food and music and dancing. Jonas watched Nadira try to dance with some of the other women, her height making it awkward, but her laughter making it beautiful. As the sun set, painting the sky in oranges and reds, Jonas found himself standing on the porch of the cabin, looking out over his land, their land now. Nadira joined him, her arm around his shoulders, his around her waist. "Are you happy?" she asked. "More than I've ever been." "I am. For the first time in my life, I feel like I belong somewhere. Not because someone told me I had to be there, but because I chose it." She looked at him. "Thank you for giving me that choice. Thank you for choosing me." They stood there in comfortable silence as the party continued around them. Running Wolf was chasing fireflies with some of the town children, his laughter carrying on the evening air. Kael and Amma sat talking quietly with Dr. Pritchard, 3 people from different worlds finding common ground. The townfolk mixed with the Apache delegation barriers, breaking down through shared food and shared joy. "This is what victory looks like," Nadira said quietly. not armies defeated or enemies destroyed. Just people choosing to build instead of burn, to love instead of hate, to stand together instead of apart. Jonas nodded. It's a good victory. The best kind. As darkness fell and stars emerged, the party wound down. People drifted away offering congratulations and well wishes. Eventually, it was just Jonas, Nadira, and Running Wolf standing in front of their home. "Are you my father now, ghost man?" Running Wolf asked. "Since you married sister?" Jonas looked at Nadira, who nodded. "If you want me to be." "I do. But can I still call you Ghost Man? I like that name better." Jonas laughed. "You can call me whatever you want, son." The word felt strange in his mouth, but good. He'd never thought he'd have a family, had never imagined it after Sarah died, but here he was, a father to a boy he'd helped save a husband, to a woman he'd helped free, building a life from the ruins of the past. They went inside the cabin, warm with lamplight and the promise of tomorrow. Running Wolf chattered about the party, about the people he'd met, about how he'd eaten 3 pieces of cake. Nadira listened with patient attention, answering questions, laughing at his jokes. Jonas watched them, these 2 people who'd come into his life in blood and desperation, who'd stayed through choice and love. He thought about the man he'd been 6 months ago, alone, burdened by guilt, going through the motions of living without really being alive. That man was gone. In his place was someone who'd learned that redemption wasn't something you earned through suffering. It was something you found through choosing again and again to do the right thing, even when it cost you everything. Later, after Running Wolf was asleep, Jonas and Nadira sat by the fire. She leaned against him, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. "I used to think I was cursed," Nadira said quietly. "Too big, too different, too much. My tribe saw me as an omen of bad luck. My husband saw me as property to be controlled. I believed them, believed I was wrong, that I didn't deserve happiness. And now I know they were wrong. My size isn't a curse, it's just part of who I am. And who I am is someone worth loving, someone who deserves to be happy." She looked at him. "You taught me that. By loving me without trying to change me. By seeing strength instead of monstrosity." Jonas kissed her forehead. "You taught me something too. That it's never too late to choose different. That one person standing up for what's right can change everything. That courage isn't the absence of fear, it's the decision to act despite it." They sat there as the fire burned low, comfortable in silence, comfortable with each other. Outside, the Dakota night was cold and clear, stars bright overhead. Inside, warmth and love and the quiet contentment of people who'd found their place in the world, not through destiny or fate or divine intervention, but through choice, through resilience, through the simple human refusal to surrender to despair. And that Jonas thought as he drifted toward sleep was the most powerful magic of all. Epilogue. 5 years passed. The ranch prospered. Jonas and Nadira worked it together, raising cattle and horses, building a reputation for quality stock and honest dealing. Running Wolf grew tall and strong, learning to ride and rope and read. He spoke both English and Apache fluently, comfortable in both worlds. They had visitors often. Kyle came regularly, bringing news from the tribe, consulting with Nadira about leadership and justice. Amma came each spring, spending a month teaching Running Wolf about Apache history and traditions. Dr. Pritchard came for Sunday dinners, bringing sweets for the boy and medical supplies for the inevitable ranch injuries. In the 3rd year, Nadira gave birth to a daughter. They named her Sarah after Jonas's sister. She had her father's gray eyes and her mother's height, even as an infant. Jonas held her in this cabin where he'd once pulled arrows from her mother's flesh and thought about how far they'd all come. In the 5th year, the territorial governor visited. He came to dedicate a monument in Pine Creek, a stone marker commemorating the Gray Wind Massacre and the women who'd died. Nadira spoke at the ceremony, her voice carrying across the assembled crowd. "My mother and 29 other women were killed for speaking truth, for demanding honor, for refusing to be silent in the face of corruption. They died, but their truth lived. And because of that truth, things changed. Justice was done. Women found their voices, and those of us who remain learned that silence protects nothing but evil. The monument stood in the center of Pine Creek, visible to all who passed, a reminder that one voice speaking truth could echo through generations. Gray Wind died in prison in the 7th year. Jonas and Nadira didn't attend the funeral. There was no need. That chapter of their lives was closed, sealed with stone and justice and the passing of time. On a summer evening in the 10th year, Jonas sat on the porch of their expanded cabin watching Running Wolf teach Sarah how to track deer prints in the dirt. The boy was 17 now, nearly a man, tall and capable and kind. Sarah was 7, already taller than other girls her age, already showing signs of her mother's strength. Nadira joined him on the porch, moving a little slower these days, but still strong, still fierce when needed. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Giving up that bounty? Losing your ranch? All the trouble that came after?" Jonas thought about it. Thought about the scared, guilty man he'd been. Thought about the empty cabin and emptier life. Thought about what he'd gained in exchange for what he'd lost. "Not for a second," he said. And he meant it. Because home wasn't land or buildings or possessions. Home was the people you chose to stand beside. The family you built from courage and hope and the unshakable belief that tomorrow could be better than yesterday. Home was here. With her. With them. With this life they'd forged from the ashes of the old. And that Jonas knew, as he watched his family in the fading light, was worth any price. Some victories weren't measured in gold or land or glory. They were measured in ordinary moments. A child's laughter, a wife's hand in yours, the simple peace of knowing you'd chosen right. This was his victory. This was enough. The end.